Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this second Industry Notes panel event. This one we'll be chatting filmmaking and storytelling. We have a very exciting panel for you. For those of you who don't know me, as you can see, my name is Des. I'm part of the team that is running the London Sputnik Hub. I have trained as a theatre director, worked in feature films as an assistant director and directed and produced several short films, which is why I think I ended up hosting here. For those of you who do know me, you'll realise I'm wearing my glasses, and that's because I'm trying desperately to look intelligent whilst I'm amongst such illustrious compatriots. Before we go on, I'm just going to hand over to Sarah, who's going to run us through some technicalities about how you guys can ask questions, because as much as I'm going to enjoy chatting to these guys, it's really only going to be a great evening if you guys throw questions at us so that we can answer them. Sarah.
Yeah, I'm Sarah. I'm in charge of the tech today. So if you have any tech problems, send me a message in the chat if you can't see things. I must mention that this is a Zoom webinar, so you won't be able to see the other people on it. Hopefully that makes you feel more comfortable that we can't see you. And if you have any questions for the panelists, put that in the Q&A and I will feed that in. Yeah, aside from that, nothing else.
Fantastic, thanks Sarah. So just a reminder, please don't think, oh, I'll ask my question later. This evening is going to rush by. We have less than an hour now. So if you do have questions, please do fire them in and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can and answer as many as we can. So we have three amazing filmmakers with us this evening. I'll do it in alphabetical order. I'll start with Jackie Sheppard. She's a producer of feature films and short films, known for most recently for Escape from Pretoria, which is out in certain territories at the moment and will be released online soon here in the UK, and Africa United in 2010, and the multi-award winning short film I Am Sammy, which was out in 2014. Then we have, I don't know if you're in the same order on your screen, but below me is Luke Walton. Luke started producing short films in 2006 and has since produced more than 15 short films with Real Issue Films. He founded and developed the short film fund, The Pitch, in 2007, which is continuing to grow and opening a project in South Africa in 2017. And finally, on my left, I don't know where they are on your screen, is Pip Piper. Pip is a film producer and director and the founder of media companies Blue Hippo Media and One Small Barking Dog. His filmography includes The Insatiable Moon, Bicycle, and The Last Shop Standing. And now we're just going to see a short clip of elements from each of their resumes. Hopefully.
Reports coming in of a person with albinism.
The myth that consuming people with albinism will bring good luck continues to fuel this lucrative evil trade.
He did that to me!
Are you sure you want to do this, Michael?
Nathan thinks he's a god.
Do you think you're more powerful than me?
Death needs to stare him in the face for once, Baba.
This had better be important.
Mansa! When will Mansa start teaching us again?
I don't know.
I want to make him feel very human.
I could get used to this.
You are the white Mandela. You are the most deluded of them all.
Whatever happens in here, don't give up.
We've heard about you two. How many years?
8 for me.
12 for him.
Oh, but we don't plan on staying that long.
in case anyone's interested, the first clip was White Gold, which is produced by Luke and Jackie. The second clip was from Escape from Pretoria, which is produced by Jackie. And as we saw, the final clips were a showreel of Pip's work. So we'll crack on. And first of all, just so we can find out a little bit more about each of you, I wonder if you could tell us in turn, and I'll go in the same order, just so you're aware, a little bit more about your journey becoming a filmmaker to the point where you're asked to be on a panel like this. Jackie.
Okay, thanks, Des. Hi, everybody. So my journey has been slightly an odd one. I didn't come up through the ranks of film as some people would do. So when I was younger, much as I loved film, I sort of thought filmmaking was for other people. It was for people who lived in big houses in Hollywood and not for normal people like me who just, came from a very ordinary family. So I did a number of different things, including being a civil servant, and then gradually sort of developed and went back to film school and came out, and I did some documentary things. But then it was a difficult time for the television industry. When is it not a difficult time for the film and television industry? And so sort of switched horses to get a slightly more proper job and went to work for a church organisation, doing kind of comms and PR. So went on the other side of the fence. And then from there, I started to develop doing some sort of large scale worship events. And that developed into then producing for large scale worship events. And I got to go to some lovely places like Hawaii and Hong Kong and do big arena events, met and worked with some very lovely people. And then it was interesting because earlier we were having a discussion and Murray Watt's name came up. And I happened to be producing at a conference where Murray was talking about, if you really want to do something and you believe that God has called you to do it, then you just have to do it, even if it's successful or not. So for him, it meant writing and just keep writing, and a lot of stuff would end up in the drawer. And I'd always wanted to be in film and make films. And I just sat there and listened to Murray and thought, right, okay, that's what I'm going to do then. And I happened to make contact with the chap who is now my producing partner, and joined him in producing feature films and short films, working particularly with Luke, who's off to my right on my screen. So it was a sort of a slightly circuitous route, but that's how I got there.
It sounds exciting. Thanks. Luke, can you tell us a bit more about your journey?
Yeah, I think I guess maybe I think we'll all say it's a circuitous route, because in some ways, certainly when I was growing up, there wasn't a clear way into to making film. I think my journey genuinely started when I fell in love with film, and that was, we'll come back to that later, but it was kind of passionate about going to the movies from when I was really little. And then when I was at school, I discovered I wasn't ever quite good enough to get into one of the school teams, particularly in the spring term. I could never quite make it into the school team, but I was good enough to be in the squad. And there was a really lovely little loophole, which was if you could get into the squad but not the team, they missed you on what were called team games, which is what you were supposed to do if you weren't off playing a match for the school. So I used to sneak away and go to the movies. And I lived in Oxford and would go down to the Penultimate Picture Palace, or I'd go to the Walton Street Cinema and watch Nosferatu the Vampire or Coma or some great movies. And I just grew up with thinking that all local cinemas were really brilliant. So I fell in love with movies like that. And I remember asking a school friend what was he going to do when he grew up. And he said he was going to make movies, which he has, but we won't go there. I remember thinking at the time when he said that to me, oh wow, I wish I could be in those. I'd like to be in those, which I still would actually. But anyway, that percolated while I read law, which is completely off the boil and really didn't work for me at all. Although it turns out it's quite useful to have some law in the background if you're going to produce, because it turns out there's a lot of paperwork, and that's quite a useful thing to have worked that bit of brain. And then I went to work for the health service because I wanted to work in public service. And one morning, a friend of mine rang me up and said, do you fancy auditioning for our theatre company, Riding Lights, in York? And I was really, at that point, beam end on the NHS. and I'm afraid I ditched what now, of course, would have been my opportunity to be clapped every week, and went off and joined Riding Lights as an actor. And then weirdly, at the end of that, decided I'd go and read theology and get ordained. So this is really circuitous. But after I'd been doing that for a while, I found myself really wanting to connect with outside of the church community more and more and more. I sort of preached my way out the door. And an opportunity came up with the Charity Bible Society, who were wanting to connect with people in the arts, connect scripture with people in the arts. And it was the first time that the kind of requirement to have some management training, some arts background and a good theology under your belt actually made any kind of sense. So I applied on the basis that a crazy CV might work. And basically my first love, film, became where I looked. I looked at theatre, we did some theatre, some installations, other things, but I landed with film. So that's how I've ended up doing this and running that.
Circuitous certainly is the theme coming out here.
Come on, Pip.
Pip, are you gonna add to the theme?
I'm absolutely going to add. I'm going to complete the circle because for me it was my background. Well, really for me, my background's always been sort of involved with young people. So I was a youth worker, professional youth worker for a long time. But prior to that, I've always been into the outdoors. So I've been an outdoor pursuits instructor and all sorts of things. And I had a friend who ran way back, in the 80s, a small corporate film company. And I used to go on shoots with him to basically rig ropes to put him in just extraordinary, stupid places to capture things. But kind of really enjoyed the process of what he was doing. And anyway, many years later, when I was a professional youth worker, I had a young person who came back from university early and needed a bit of support, and they wanted to do some creative things. And so we started to make short films using compact VHS, just really basic, cheap kit that we got at the time. And I was on the circuit sort of doing youth stuff, going to national conferences, various things like that. And I would take these little films that we're creating, like the creation story out of Lego and all sorts of things. And it just really sparked something. And so that turned into Once Will Barking Dog, the media charity. And for several years, that became my life, creating resources for youth workers. We did the kind of images for worship stuff, which became quite well known at the time. And then doing documentaries. So we traveled the world really making short form documentaries about issues. And then that led into Blue Hippo Media, which was set up as a kind of commercial film company because we were having people approach us with scripts and we had our own ideas. And we set up a company to essentially do bits of corporate work that would then finance independent work. And over the past 12 years, we've made 7 feature-length films. And that's been a really extraordinary journey. So again, no formal training, just taking opportunity, I suppose, seeing what doors open up to you and what skill sets seem to work within that, and I guess having a bit of tenacity, etc. Now I'm kind of coming full circle because I'm kind of in the midst of closing down Blue Hippo Media with my business partner, and really refocusing back on the media charity where I have a real passion for helping develop kind of emerging young filmmakers, developing talent, but also encouraging people to think about making films that matter, films that have something to say into society, into culture. So yeah, another very circuitous journey.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. For any of our younger attendees, VHS was how you recorded video. It was a tape system.
Yeah, we're talking analog, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's not go back there. Just to further get to know you guys a little bit more, just a quick whiz round, and we'll start with Pip this time. We'll go back in reverse order. Were there any, Luke alluded to this already, but were there any films or a film in particular that really sort of inspired you and made you think, that's what I want to do? If I can, I want to work in film.
Yeah, I had to think about this. I've always been impacted by films with, big heart at the center of them and kind of big stories to tell. So really important films to me are things like The Killing Fields, The Mission, Cry Freedom, some of those really big movies that came out, certainly in my formative years, that had a big impact on how how storytelling, you know, and not just through film, but theatre, all sorts of things can just impact you as a human being. And documentaries and TV, but also books, you know, photography, you know, art, all sorts of things that just speak into you. And I think at the heart of who I am is I'm a communicator, and within wanting to communicate, I found film as you know, a medium and a methodology really where I can do that. But it's finding things that speak to the heart, make an impact, they leave a lasting memory, whatever format. Those things have influenced me.
So The Mission, so I'm just realizing again, these are films that have been out for a long time, and some people
I'm
may have
old.
missed.
I'm 56.
So The Mission was great. Killing
You're
Fields. And what was the other one you mentioned?
The Killing Fields and Cry Freedom.
Cry Freedom.
I mean, I did a thesis on Steve Biko, so I was very heavily involved in all of that. Yeah, that was a very important story for me.
All films worth checking out if you've not seen them before. They are a little older, but they are great. Luke.
Yeah, they're really timeless films, and because I'm also ancient, I also loved all three of those. Plus, I'd also throw in Gandhi. I'd throw in Missing with Sissy Spacek and Jack Lemmon, another absolute classic. And in fact, I joined Amnesty International as a result of watching that film, because I came out so affronted. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't grow up reading newspapers or watching news or anything, but I came out affronted by the fact that there could be governments that would simply make people go missing. That's the essence of that story. And I just was shocked and horrified by a world where that still happened. I mean, I could put it into a Nazi era or into a particular revolutionary period or something, but the idea that it might be happening around me. So I've been a lifelong member of Amnesty International, and I think there is something about the way film has the power to change your heart that is at the heart of why I love film and why I want to be involved in it. It's about reaching that emotional place. A friend of ours, Laurie Hutzler, says, you know, nobody goes to the movies to watch someone else have an experience. They go to have the experience themselves. And I think there is something really incorporating about that, and that rings true for me. Yeah. So it is about those are formative. But I also want to say, before references, that type of film continues to resonate with me. Get Out, Midnight. Oh gosh, I mean, there's so many out at the moment that I think really powerful, positive stories I want to kind of relate to, and to which a big shout out to my colleague Jackie, whichever way she is on this panel, because Escape is a really rocking prison break story. It's terrifically gripping, and so it isn't that it necessarily has to be really heavy on some particular purpose. It can be just a very entertaining film. But you'll find the more that one's entertained by the film, the more you think around the themes that were there. Why was this happening? What was behind it? And I think that draws you deeper into the context. So film isn't necessarily the answer, and it isn't necessarily an education. It's an entertainment. But that entertainment can have a profound impact on us.
Jackie.
Yeah, follow that. I mean, I think I'd say ditto to everything that both Pip and Luke said. And I couldn't point to a film that I sat and watched and thought, wow, that's it. But as a kid, actually, I was the bookworm of the family. I was the one always to be found in the corner, curled up with a good book. And I used to love going to bookstores. I'm old as well. When I used to go to a bookstore in Tunbridge Wells and come out with a little pile of books that they would wrap in brown paper wrapping for me, and I'd carry it home, and I would just sit down and read for the afternoon. I loved stories, but I also loved biographies, and I loved reading about real people, and real people doing extraordinary things, and I think so. You just take all of that and combine it. And of course, yes, I've always loved films, and for me, again, Cry Freedom. Funnily enough, I've been trying to get hold of a copy of Cry Freedom because I always remember loving that film, and I haven't seen it for years, and I thought I'd love to just watch it again and see. And sometimes you go back to things and they don't quite stand the test of time, but actually I'm working my way through the box set of The West Wing at the moment, and realizing that is still just as good as it was when I first saw it. But yeah, so films like Cry Freedom, Captain Phillips, Apollo 13, stories that tell true stories. And one of the things that I used to do when I worked for a church organization was we made corporate stuff, but they were always true stories of people doing sometimes quite extraordinary things. It's very ordinary people, and I loved telling those stories. And I remember one of the things that we did won an award, and I remember getting up to get the award and just saying, the really important thing for me is that we tell those stories with authenticity and integrity. So when we were telling, so Tim Jenkin, who's the guy whose story we tell in Escape from Pretoria, was an anti-apartheid activist in South Africa, a white guy. And he said to us when we started on the journey to try and make the film, please don't turn me into James Bond. And we didn't. You know, Daniel Radcliffe is not James Bond. And it is about just the authenticity of the story and trying to tell that. Obviously, you have to spark it in a dramatic way so that an audience will enjoy it. But I think that's what I enjoy. It's that combination of real life, entertainment, good drama, and just being able to make people reflect through having that experience of entertainment, but also thinking. And the thing I always wanted people to come away from Escape with was, you know, would I have had the courage if I had been living in South Africa in the 1970s? Would I have had the courage to stand up and say apartheid is wrong? And actually, I'm not just going to say it, I'm going to do something about it. And if people can, and that still has a contemporary resonance, you know, films like that can still speak to us.
Yeah, fantastic. Questions are coming in. Thank you, guys. Keep them coming in. Don't wait too long because we'll be over before you know it. We have one more question before coming to the others, but we've sort of touched on this, so I don't think this will take very long, because the question is, and Jackie was really touching on it there already, so I'll probably come to Luke first this time. But just, you know, when you're looking for a new project, what is it in a story that you go, wow? Because we all know filmmaking is a lot of hard work. You got to really want to do it. So what is it in a story that makes you go, yes, I'm going to put all the effort in because that's worth telling? Luke.
Well, the way that the film fund that I run, the pitch, is we have people live pitch, which actually I really love that idea, because people come and tell their stories, and those stories spark. It's like the conversation we're having. It's like someone telling a joke in a pub. But what really makes a story stand out to me is that moment when it plays in your head. The way someone is telling it, you are seeing it right there and then. And generally that's because you care. Something in it has found its way to the emotional heart that I was talking about before. You care about the characters, you're invested in them. There's a way of telling a story where you kind of know what happened, you kind of got the events, but you don't really somehow connect or care about it. So it's all about to me, it's all about the character at the heart of it and how we relate to that. And that can be a lot about, there are skills to learn about how you do that, how you get that across well, but I can't tell you there's anything other than that sense that you sing it in your head and it's the emotional heart of it. If someone walks in the room and is going to give you an idea, actually you really want them to come with a good idea. And when they do, you know it just happened. There's a sort of a buzz, there's a stillness, there's hairs on the back of the neck, you know, obviously more in my case.
Really?
They come up. Harsh. Still, you know, that's what I would say. It's the emotional heart for me.
Fantastic. Pip, what is it that ticks that box for you?
I don't think there's much more to it. It's exactly the same. I mean, I think there's, you mentioned it in the intro, filmmaking is, you know, it's ridiculously hard. So you can't set, particularly if you're looking at features, you can't set out on that journey being a bit half-hearted about the thing that you want to do, or that you kind of like it but you don't like it. You know, it's not that maybe you've absolutely utterly fallen in love with it, but there's got to be that connection that Luke's talking about. And also I think, you know, you've got to remember that with, you know, at that level of the end of it, you're talking about things that are going to require money, you know, so you've got to lance a few other things around the idea of, you know, is this something that an audience is going to want to find and discover? Is, you know, is money going to want to be attached to this? Is there going to be a market for it? So there's a lot of things that you have to kind of look through. So filmmakers historically have slates of different projects that have, you know, different energies and life cycles to them, some of which will see the light of day, some won't. But you've got to believe in it in the first place and think there's a journey to be had with it.
Yeah, yeah. And Jackie, you've sort of mentioned some of this already, and you said that for a large part for you is a real story based on real events or a real person. Is that generally always the case? Is that the sort of thing you find you're most passionate about?
Well, funnily enough, both Mark, my producing partner in Footprint Films, and I have come from a documentary background, and I think that does obviously enforce that idea that we would look at true stories. Although, of course, Africa United was not a true story, but felt like it could have been. 5 kids walking from Rwanda to the World Cup. And we've actually got a film out with financiers at the moment, which is not a true story, but sort of feels like it could be, because again, it raises all sorts of issues. I think for us, it's a gut thing. So Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink, where he talks about go with your gut instinct. You know, we spend a lot of time over analyzing, but actually somebody brought us a story recently, which is another true story. And there's a book, and I read the book, and my immediate gut was yes. You know, that's because there's so many contemporary resonances, although it would be a period drama. Just it says so much even today about what life is like, and I think it is that gut instinct for the story. But as Pip says, you've bloomin' gotta love it, because Escape from Pretoria took us, well, Mark first met Tim Jenkins 16 years ago, but it took us 6 years to get the film. Yeah. Once we really got going, it took us 6 years to get the film out, done and out there. So if you don't love it, leave it behind, because you're going to be on that project. And of course, as a producer, you're always on the project. It's never left. You know, it will always be your film, and there will always be people asking you about it.
Yeah. It's a long time. If at the start you don't like it, that's a long time.
If you don't like it at the start, you're not going to like it at the end.
Yeah. So we've got some great questions coming in. Thank you, guys. If you any more, keep them coming. First one I think was from Joel, but I won't know all of your names, so sorry in advance. Have your filmmaking motives changed, developed over the years? Pip, start with you. Have your filmmaking motives changed or developed over the years?
Absolutely. In the first place, I never wanted to make money. Now it's just about making money. You know. So, absolutely. So my wife told me I had to say that.
I thought you had to do that.
Yeah, I have to do that. Yeah.
And has she told you how to do that?
Yeah, that's the problem. That's a really good question, Joel.
Yeah,
I think the reality is it parallels so many other things in your life. So yes, the truth is I'm not the same person I was when I started out, you know, believing that I could make films, you know, because of life, because of all sorts of things, you know, that have gone on. I think the core motive to want to bring to life stories that I feel have a resonance in some way to an audience is still true. That motive is still true, and I wouldn't start a project unless I actually really genuinely believed in that still. But I've definitely changed over time. I'd like to think I've got a bit wiser about how it works. I'm less naive. I'm definitely a lot more tired. So I think in a way it kind of parallels your life. But I'm a great believer in, you have to take moments in life to reflect on the journey that your life has taken. And so I think whatever you do, if you do those reflections, if you have core good friendships around you that you trust and who love you, who will talk truth to you about where you're at, about what you're doing, about the impact it might be having on you and your family, because we will all know many filmmakers whose families are littered because of what this industry does to you.
Yeah.
Then I think you're probably putting yourself in a good place to at least make that journey well in some way.
Just thank you, but just a flag, I'm going to come back to a slight point on this in a minute. So start thinking about where the crossover, I know it was a joke, but where the crossover between not caring about money to caring about money may have happened. But Jackie, how has your filmmaking motivation changed?
To be honest, I don't think it has. I think the only thing that I've realised as we've gone through the process is that some of the films that we want to make that might be a bit more overt with their faith, and that's not to say we want to make Christian films, because I definitely don't want to do that, but films that might have a bit more of a stronger faith element built in. You have to earn the right to be able to make those films, and that you only do that by making the films like Escape that will get you noticed, and then doors can open for you.
Thank you. Luke?
Yeah, no, I think a bit like Jackie. I'm not sure that my motivation has changed, although like Pip, I'd say I hope I've enriched him. I'm less naive, I hope. I think I'm always learning, and I think the thing that changes is that you're always hopefully learning. Well, if you remain open to learning, you're gaining wisdom and you're gaining traction. Here's an interesting thought about, just because Jackie was touching on the faith aspect. And one of the interesting things I've always thought about with producing, at least, is if a producer's job in real shorthand is kind of bringing the team together and making sure everyone's doing the same film, making the same film. I often think with the producers, the interesting thing is it ought to be a bit like being a vicar. In other words, you shouldn't be the star. You're not the star, actually. But what you should be doing is taking the team you have around you and making stars of them doing what they do best as a team. And I'm really committed to that. I really like that approach.
Fantastic. Thank you. Pip, I'm going to come straight back to you, and then because thank you, Phil Mash, for the question. It was very timely. He asks, how do you pay the bills whilst making films? Which ties in really to that you said, and I'm aware you were sort of partially joking, but there's a truth in there that at some point we all start out idealists and think we'll just want to make stories, but then reality hits home and there are bills to pay. So
I mean, this is the sustainability is what we're talking about here, which is an aspect that all arts have to look at. It really depends on where you place yourself within the medium of making film. You know, I think, you know, the value of somebody who spends 5 days a week doing a job and earning their money to give them the oxygen to make short films or even longer form films as a so-called amateur is just as valid as somebody who's doing it, you know, so-called professionally full time and somehow earns a living from doing that. I think there are so many ways that you can find a way to give yourself the oxygen to create and make things. And that's kind of the first thing that you have to really think about is, where do you want to be on that spectrum? Once you've decided where you want to be on it, then you've got to look at what are your routes to it. And all I'd say really is it will take you longer than you think. So the sustainability side of it, you really have to think through how you're going to manage that, because, you know, it is a roller coaster. So I constantly find myself, I do a lot of mentoring, in really just encouraging people to just keep going, but to look a little bit more intently at the way they're managing the journey that they're on, and their expectations. So you can't put aside the idea that you need money to make films, you need money to live on, but I don't. There's no clear-cut route. It's about finding that sustainability space that works for you at that point.
Yeah, yeah, excellent advice. Luke or Jackie, do you have anything to add?
Who says I'm paying the bills? You have to be. I mean, we do. Well, I do a number of things as well. I've still done some event producing, and obviously we work with Luke on the pitch, so that keeps us ticking over. So I still do additional bits here and there, but as well, we've been fortunate that a big feature has come along at the right time, and so we've been able to put some money in the bank. But then you don't know, it could be another 6 years before we do another one, so you're living on that money for some time. Whenever people come to me and say, oh, I do this job and I'm really bored and I want to step out and do what you did and go freelance and be a filmmaker, I just say, stick with a day job. Don't do it.
I'm aware, Luke, you're the one that's in a slightly different position.
I am actually, and it's interesting to say that. And I think I am in a privileged, vanishingly rare position that I'm supported by a charity in doing this work. And I should add that I do quite a lot for the charity that isn't directly associated with this, which in a way is my, part of the week where I'm working for the right to do this. But I am working hard to try and bring that investment in that sustains both, all ends of the spectrum. It's a privilege working alongside Mark and Jackie and to contribute in some way to their great work. But actually, they contribute just as much to us as any way other way around. So I think it is about creating it. Now, Sophie in the webinar chat has put an interesting question about developing community and how can we develop community and support networks that Christian filmmakers can really benefit from, so that as years go by, it becomes increasingly viable for people to create and work in this industry without things like families taking such a negative toll or individuals getting burnt out or struggling in their faith, which isn't quite on the, I mean, it's a bigger issue, and I'm sorry if I've cut across where you were going with that, but I think it does tie into that for me, the money thing is about trying to create some bandwidth. Now, it's not just about money, but money really helps. And I think from my experience, particularly working in different spheres within Christian life, Christian artists are somehow the hardest up. And if you want some security, a vicar is a better place to be, I'm not saying all church ministers, because some really step out, and I'm not castigating. I'm simply saying that the reality of working within the arts, live or whatever, or film, is perilous. And I have many great friends who are kind of fine artists or in theatre as well as in film. And I see them really struggling. So there are several things. One, we need to encourage politically, put pressure on those supporting the arts. We, particularly in this time of COVID, must get our government to support the arts generally across the board. We must try and find within ourselves the community pool that can help from a Christian perspective, one another, care for one another, care for others. And I think mentoring is the other way I'd want to respond to both Sophie and kind of this issue, which Pip has alluded to, which is having people, wise people, to speak truth to you that you can accept, and critical friends. But mentoring generally across generations and across experience, that's going to add, it doesn't add necessarily bread on the table, but it does add a layer of wisdom and understanding and encouragement. And that community belonging to one another is a part of surviving.
Sorry. No, go ahead, Jackie.
Oops.
Well, just very quickly, I think the pitch has been very good at building community around filmmakers. So filmmakers that have applied to the pitch, and then, it's not just about the kind of main fund, but there's lots of development legs along the way where people get together. And I think people have then begun to network, and some have gone off to work together from that. And those sort of more informal structures, I mean, there are the slightly more formal kind of Christians in media or whatever, but those slightly informal structures, I think, are really worth tapping into, because there's quite a pitch family now that of filmmakers.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, you know, we're here as part of Sputnik, so, you know, I know Sputnik really want to develop the, you know, that kind of the film community aspect inside of what they're doing as well. And I'm talking to Johnny about that, and we've been piloting some stuff with young people around that. And the charity that I developed back in the 90s, OSBD, Once We're Walking Dog, which is just osbd.org, we've just launched last week In the Frame, which is an online virtual portal for emerging young filmmakers where you can sign up and create a profile for yourself, and it's full of ways in which you can message one another, you know, in the community. You can collaborate. We're going to be looking for commissioning strands for young talent, so do check that out. But lots of things like what's been said about the pitch, you need to find spaces and places and people that you can connect in with. And, you know, networking often gets a bit of a kind of a dirty name, you know, in the creative arts, but take away the idea of networking and talk about how do you develop, you know, meaningful communities with people that understand who you are and what you're about, and not just necessarily identical to you. They're all trying to be film directors, but people who just generally have a concern and a love and a passion for the arts and want to help and encourage people who are trying to make that journey. It's so important to tap in, because otherwise it is an industry where you can get quite isolated if you're not careful, and it's really important not to do that.
Excellent. I'm feeling slightly ignored. We are unfortunately already starting to run out of time, and there are a number of questions that's come in. One that I think well, certainly I'll start with Jackie, because it's sort of a little more obvious for Luke, but how does your faith influence your practice? Because you expressed already, Jackie, that you're not into making Christian films, as in, I'm guessing, films that are explicitly about Jesus or the Bible in some way. So how, at this point, and you said about earning the right to be able to make a film that was sort of more faith-filled. So how have you managed to weave your faith into your work?
Well, I think you have to be a bit wiser about it and a bit more subtle. Africa United actually had a sort of parable that ran through it, and I remember going to a screening and a Christian friend coming up to me afterwards, and it was a film that we made with Pathé and BBC Films and the then UK Film Council, and she said to me, "Do you think Pathé have realised how much of the Christian kind of faith story you've put into that film?" And I said, "Just shh, because if they don't notice, it's fine. We'll just carry on." And I think our faith does determine the kind of films that we want to make and the kind of films that we don't want to make. We get approached regularly by people offering us horror movies to make. Well, it would have to be something quite significant or extraordinary for us to do that, because that's not the kind of sphere that I engage with or would want to be part of. So, and I think that's why we tend to do the kind of ordinary people stepping out on extraordinary journeys. And it might be that there are then things that take us a bit further towards the faith sphere. It might be somebody who's coming from a faith background, and that's the reason for them doing a bit like what was Mel Gibson's film?
Passion of Christ.
No. Hacksaw Ridge.
Oh, Hacksaw, yeah.
So, which was really just a massive, great war film, but about a guy whose faith determined the way. Now, Mel Gibson obviously earned the right to make those kinds of films because of all the body of work that he had behind him. And so if you're going to get to that, but for the moment, it determines the kind of films that Mark and I would say we'd want to have, we'd want to be telling that story.
And just quickly, because I want to throw this round, does it inform the people that you will choose to work with? Because obviously, as producer, you get to do some of the hiring.
Yeah, sure. And it's interesting that the last two films, the directors have both been Christians, and that's been interesting. But sometimes it can't inform who you work with, because the pragmatics of making a movie are such that you end up working with people who perhaps you would otherwise have nothing in common, and you just have to get on with it. And actually, I think there's something quite good about that. When we were working with Pathé, they knew we were Christians, and they used to laugh about it sometimes, and kind of, you're not going to convert us, and all this kind of thing. But it sort of didn't matter. We were normal people as far as they were concerned, and we just kind of got on with it. So, yeah, no, I'd love to say in the film business you could pick and choose exactly, I only want to work with that person. But again, until you've earned the right to do that, until you're Steven Spielberg, and you can say, yeah, I'm only going to work with that person, then for the moment you just get on. But then you try and make sure you're living out your faith and behaving in a way that's appropriate, whilst other people may be behaving in ways that are quite different to the way that you would behave.
Yeah, I will come to you, Pip, but I'm just thinking, for contrast, Luke, although your faith is sort of out there because the pitch very much is Bible sourced, but you don't limit it to Christians, do you?
No, absolutely not. And it's not quite proportionate, but we have, most of our winners haven't been people of faith. We do have people who are Christian who win, but it's out there to fight for, and that's because we're open to anybody and from any background, and we welcome actually sometimes people who don't have preconceptions of what ought to be said about any passage, any complicated clutter from 1,000 sermons and umpteen Bible studies, actually cut through with a naivety and a simplicity that tells the story in a really fresh way. And that can be really energizing. So I think for me, I think the faith thing is about actually working with all people, and the faith should impact us, I guess, in personal discipleship. That is how we conduct ourselves, how we do our business. And of course, it will affect the stories we want to tell and the projects we want to get involved in. Yes, the Bible element is inspirational, and we are an adaptation challenge in particular. I'll let Pip make some other comments as well. But it's not, we're not asking for a Christian reading. In fact, one of the things we put in our terms and conditions is we don't want polemic from any angle. We don't want people going, it's a load of bunkum, and we don't want people going, here's the sermon for the choir. We want people to come with a story that they found inspired from that material. But that in itself changes one's perception of the book.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been very strong about this. I'm not a Christian filmmaker. I'm not interested in that at all. I'm interested in telling stories and making films with whoever. I've made some choices in the past where it's been a bit tricky, around that. But I am a person of faith, and my faith is of massive importance to me. It defines me. I hope, as a a better person walking this planet, because I'm trying to in some way emulate Jesus. But I muck up and I get it wrong, and sometimes I don't make the best decisions about things. But I think what's really good about that, when you're working, predominantly I've worked mainly really alongside people on the bigger projects that don't necessarily have a faith, is that you kind of just got to live it out with as much integrity as you can, but the warts and all of what it means to be a human being. And I think, like Jackie's saying, that's just really important that we're out there doing that. And even when you're making films, like, most people say, like, you've made a film about record shops, and I have had people come to, what are you doing that for? Why are you making films about stupid things like that? You could be making films about Jesus, and I'm like, well, what you need to understand is that I'm finding narrative threads within these stories, which I really feel have a kingdom resonance within them, but you're going to have to work hard to go and find those, So it's for me, I find I've met some amazing people way outside of what we consider to be our faith sort of space, where actually I just see so much of the kingdom at work. And particularly because my main body of work is documentary, I'm fascinated by finding these moments and these bits of light in all sorts of strange sort of places that you can hopefully bring to life within the film for those that have got the eyes and the hearts to see it.
And that resonates a very lovely thing, actually. That when Jesus told stories and he answered so many questions by telling a story, he most clearly, his stories are obscure, sometimes difficult, complicated. They've got a sting in the tail. They're tricky things. Yeah. And they often were. He was saying, if you got ears to hear, hear. And I think sometimes we think there's too simplistically in the way we approach all of the storytelling we do.
Fantastic, guys. We are unfortunately coming towards an end now. I just want to say there have been some great questions that have come through the channel, but we're not going to be able to get to them all. I'm very sorry. I did try and encourage you to get them in early. There is one more that I'd like to ask, because I think it's a nice place for us to sort of round up from, because we started sort of with a little bit of the beginnings of your journeys. So now we're going to focus a little bit on things that may be coming down the road. And the question very much is there a story you really want to tell through film but haven't been able to yet? And I'll start with you, Pip, because you said you're significantly changing where you're at with your filmmaking, but within that, and you're focusing on mentoring and the charity, but are there still stories that you would love to get out there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not giving up on it. I mean, I've still got films on my slate and I've got projects historically. I guess I'm just changing the majorative kind of emphasis on what I'm doing, really. But, you know, I'm developing the biography story around Larry Norman. Larry Norman was incredibly important to me as a young Christian, his music. And, you know, we've got the rights to that. We've now got the entire archive of Larry Norman. Safe storage in America, and I'm very excited about that, because I think for me, you know, my Christian journey has been one like many people where I've really struggled at times. I've had to really fight through. I've had to try and work out what it really means and everything. And I think kind of slightly controversial characters like Larry are great, because I think they bring into the fore a way of kind of sifting through that to try and find the kind of the beautiful gem at the heart of it. And so I'm very excited about that, but you know, I'm just taking a bit longer to develop that. So on a similar vein, I've been for over 10 years trying to develop a story around Sadhu Sundar Singh, who was an amazing mystic in India. And we've toyed between feature film. We actually had development for 2 years and worked with a French writer, a Sikh guy, developing that into a feature. Then it kind of became a documentary. So yeah, there's all kinds of things. But if I'm really honest as well, and maybe this is something for people to really hear here, because this industry can be very much about, oh, I haven't made it until I've got there. And listen to me very carefully, because when you get there, all you see is the vista of the next there and the next there and the next there. So it's got to be much deeper than that. And for me, I'm actually really excited about going back to short form, where actually we can make films really quickly, you know, and find things and respond to things. I'm finding that really exhilarating, rather than, you know, like my first feature film took 10 years. You know, I haven't got another one of those in me.
Cool. Luke. What?
Yeah, well, actually, one of my favourite nights ever, Pip, was when Larry played in Bradford, and afterwards I went groupie on him because I'm a huge fan, and we went out for curry with him, and I got a great picture of us drinking lassi together around the table with Larry. So
you have to send that.
Yeah, I'll go back to that kid that I was sat next to at school, Sam Mendes, when he said he wanted to make movies, and I thought, oh, I want to be in them, but I didn't say it. So I'm going to say it now. I want to be in your movie with Larry. Thank you. So they've done that. I think there's a film about Josephine Butler, the 19th century reformer. I'd love to have a part in that. Riff actually does have a slate. Riff is the Real Issues Films, is the production arm that helps produce the short films, and Jackie works alongside me and I work alongside her making those films, and some of those do have potential to go to feature, but I resonate with what Pip says about being in the moment. If COVID has taught us anything, it's that we're not in control. We never were in control, and that now matters. So what you're doing now matters. And yes, it's great to have a vision, and it's great to be thinking ahead, and it's always good to have a what next on your slate if you're a filmmaker. I learned that pretty early on, that you should never be in the potential of being in a meeting where someone can't ask you, what are you doing next? And you can go, oh, I've got several ideas, which would you like? Give me the money. But perhaps rounding out for me, I'd love to be able to see this kind of work and the kind of work that Pip's doing, investing in younger talent. I'd love to see that really engaged and strengthening and growing, because I think the future is always in training others and bringing others on.
You know, you and Pip make me feel sad inside, because I suddenly realise I'm not that young person anymore. I don't count as young.
I've just mentored a 67-year-old.
Where I'm at now. Cool.
I think
feel a lot better.
I think that's why I always try and say we're helping emerging filmmakers, and you can emerge at any time, because I feel like I'm still emerging, and I'm just slightly older than Pip, so you know there's hope for us all. I tell you, you don't have to. And I think in terms of things, yes, there are films on our slate that we want to make, and so there's a couple of stories that I would love to tell, and I'm sort of loath to mention them in case somebody else goes and runs off with the idea. But actually, I think what both the guys have said about being in the moment, and because actually when we were trying to get Escape away, I thought, oh, will I be one of the 70%, or is it 80% now, who never get to make a second feature? Because that's the statistic, isn't it? That, you know, 80% of people who make a first feature never go on to make a second. And I was thinking, does that mean I've failed? But actually, I've spent quite a lot of time working on the pitch with emerging filmmakers and helping them get a leg up. And Footprint itself, part of our ethos is about supporting emerging filmmakers. So of the 6 features we've done, 5 have been with first-time feature directors. Now, the film we've actually gone out for finance at the moment, we've actually hired a director who would be her second feature. So it's quite an unusual thing for us, but it is only a second feature. And I think there's plenty that's good and, you know, worthwhile about just doing that. And if I died tomorrow and that was all I'd done, I don't think that would be a bad thing. But at the same time, I'd like not to die tomorrow, because there are some very exciting stories that I do want to tell.
Can I just say on that point, it's only in the UK that it's 80%. You go and live in France, it's, you know, only 30% of people don't get to make a second feature. So we still need to do a lot of work in this country to get more support for people.
But it is hard, isn't it? You know, if we'd had a quid for every time we were told, ditch your first-time director and come along with somebody more experienced, then we'd probably have made the film much sooner. But we were committed to it and there was one night in when we were in South Africa trying to set up Africa United, where someone offered us all the money to make the film if we ditched 2 key people off the team, and we just said, and Mark and I had to sit there. I mean, we can still remember exactly where we were when that happened, and we just had to say, no, the team is more important to us, and these emerging filmmakers are more important to us than your big stash of cash. So thanks. And then you go away and you think, did we do the right thing? Oh my gosh.
You did. It was a great film. It was a great film.
Yeah, great film.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, guys, thank you so much. We are over time. Thank you all who have been listening to us and asking questions. Thank you for sticking with us throughout the whole hour. Thank you for your questions. Be aware we are collating the questions, and we will try and ask them and get answers for you if we can, and feedback to you another time. Sorry that we didn't get through all of them. Thank you so much, Pip. Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you so much, Luke, for your time.
No, thank you. Thanks to Sarah for...
and thank you, Sarah, for making sure we could all be seen and heard. Just quickly to say, this was the second as far as I'm aware, there's going to be a third Sputnik Industry Notes event, so keep your eyes on the website. There are hubs around the country: Edinburgh, Birmingham, Cornwall, Falmouth, that's the word I was looking for, London. There's new stuff working out in Bournemouth and in Bristol. So again, make contact through the website. Keep your eyes out. Sputnik are very much about supporting filmmakers who have a faith, who are Christians, and helping them work it out through local church and want to work professionally. So if that's you, please check out the website, get in touch, come to a hub, come and meet up and encourage each other and a chance to show your work. But that's us for now. Thank you very much once again, guys. It was so interesting. I feel so privileged to have been able to host this, and hopefully see you all at some point in the future.
Thanks very much. Real pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.